this word that is always thrown around that drives me crazy: tolerate. We are constantly being asked to find a way to tolerate. So we do a healthy, whether it's keto, paleo, carnivore diet, get a bunch of stuff out of our life that was harming us, and then we're encouraged to reintroduce and see what you can tolerate. Georgia, can you please talk to the idea of tolerating foods versus eating what's healthiest?
I love this distinction because there's what's ideal or best for us, or what helps us feel our best, and then there's what we can sustainably eat over time, like what people can manage to do comfortably for long periods of time, right? And there's a big difference there. So if people want to know, okay, what are the foods that are most nutritious and safest and least risky for me to eat that are going to accomplish these three goals: nourish, protect, energize. They're going to accomplish these three goals. What are the foods on the planet that are best at all three of those things? It is the animal foods. Biologically, hands down, there's just no argument. They are the only foods that contain every nutrient we need in its proper, most highly bioavailable form. And with rare exceptions, if we're talking about meat, seafood, poultry, we're safe. Eggs and dairy, a little different, but without any anti-nutrients or defensive toxins to interfere with our full utilization of those nutrients. So only animal foods. There's not a single plant food that meets all three of those criteria. So if you can only afford one food group, this is the one to buy. And if you've got a lot of different kinds of health problems, mysterious issues, brain, body, doesn't matter. They're all the same. So one organism. You are one organism. I argue this in the book that, if maybe you've tried a whole foods, maybe you've tried a Mediterranean diet, maybe you've tried a paleo diet, maybe you've tried a ketogenic diet, you're still not doing well. Well, it makes sense from a biological standpoint to, at least temporarily as an experiment, to go plant free and see how you feel. Now, if you feel your best, which many people do, there are I've had some exceptions in my clinical practice where some people have not benefited from that, sometimes even felt worse. But by and large, most people tell me they feel their best on a so-called carnivore or plant-free diet. Then you have real information for yourself that works for you. You can then decide what you want to do long term. And so I tell people in the book, you could conceivably continue to eat this way for the rest of your life, or you could try, if it's driving you nuts not to be able to eat other things, you can try expanding your diet and find your personal safest outer limit where you're still getting enough benefits to make it worth it. Even if you don't feel as well, just to understand, if you understand, the pros and cons of these different food groups, then you can make informed choices about where you draw that line. And even if, yes, let's say I've got a patient who's 100% feeling excellent in every way on a carnivore diet, but they're miserable or socially challenged by it or feeling deprived or whatever it is, they're uncomfortable with it and they're not going to be able to stay on it. There are ways that you can expand your diet that make biological sense. I would still say there are certain places you don't want to go, no matter who you are. But most people don't have the information that they need to know what makes sense in terms of safest versus riskiest.
What I love about the distinction you just made is it's the difference between you can't possibly eat this way all the time, which is what we're told, and the reality that I might have people around me that I want to interact with who don't understand the way that I'm eating, and so that might make some kind of sense to sometimes have these other foods in my life. Or if I myself, I'm feeling I don't have the willpower, whatever you want to call it. But I want to make sure that I clarify this, and I want to make sure I got what you said right. Actually, ultimately, meat, fish, poultry, that's the thing that we need to eat. That's the thing that is called food. Everything else, all those plants, are for fun, which is what I tell my community. Plants are for fun. They're not food. They're the entertainment that you put on your plate. I feel like you're agreeing with me.
That's really funny. Yeah, I mean, I think if we're being really, what's the word? Strict in our definitions, yes, meaning that as long as if you base your diet on animal foods, I haven't found any evidence that you need to eat anything else. So, in that sense, plants are optional. And all plants contain potentially risky molecules. So and I think that's important for people to know. There are lots of people out there who, and here's the word that you love so much, tolerate. There are lots of people out there who, they seem to feel fine, if they include certain plant foods in their diet, that and there's no noticeable negative effect, at least that we can detect. But that doesn't mean that's ideal. There may be ultimately a certain price you pay that's kind of hard to figure out until we studying nutrition, studying any dietary pattern long term in different kinds of people is virtually impossible. You can't take 1,000 people and control everything they eat for 10 years and see what happens. It's impossible. So we don't have long-term experimental clinical data on any diet. And I think that's a lot of people think, oh, but this carnivore diet or even ketogenic diet, we don't have any long-term studies on that. We don't have long-term studies on any dietary pattern. So what we do have is we have just mountains of solid biological information, science about what each of these foods contains, what our cells need, how our metabolism works, all of these different things. And if you use logic and biology and evolutionary logic to design your dietary pattern, that's going to put you, in my opinion, on the safest ground for the long haul, rather than these dietary patterns that are made up out of thin air. Mediterranean diet, low fat diet, rainbow of fruits and vegetables diet, vegan diet. There are lots of other dietary patterns that we've heard are healthier for us, and none of those are grounded in biology. Even if clinical trials may show, and they do, that lots of these other dietary patterns, if you compare them to the so-called standard American diet or SAD diet, they all outperform the standard American diet in clinical trials. But what diet wouldn't? I mean, the standard American diet is so hazardous, so low quality, so unhealthy. Any change you make to that diet is going to be a step in the right direction. So there have been about a dozen different dietary patterns that have outperformed the standard American diet. Whole food, whole food plant-based diets, which include vegan and vegetarian diets, Mediterranean diets, ketogenic diets, low fat diets, low salt diets. I mean, just about any diet. There's something called a Nordic diet. Lots of diets have been tested against the standard American diet and have outperformed the standard American diet. That doesn't mean that those diets are ideal for us. It just means they're better than the standard American diet. So, and when you look at the clinical trials, when you look at the way the science is conducted about all of those different diets, which look so different on the surface, like how can a whole foods plant-based diet and say a low carbohydrate diet that includes meat, how can those two diets both be healthier for us? How can those both be considered healthy? Well, first of all, it's because they're compared to this terrible standard. So it's kind of an easy thing to win that game. But the other thing is that all of those diets actually do have something really important in common. You just can't tell, and it's just not something that shows up in the headline. Every single one of those diets in clinical trials is either dramatically lower or completely devoid of refined carbohydrates. So that's a really healthy change to make to any diet. And that may be the only reason that all these diets do better. We don't know because we don't test these things. So whatever dietary pattern people are attached to as healthy because they've seen studies, oh, this is a healthy diet, this is a healthy diet. Well, compared to what? And are you feeling your personal, emotional, and physical best on that diet or not? And just kind of trying to be as honest as you can with yourself about the answers to those questions.